The sun was setting on the horizon as Evelyn anxiously prepared for a very important dinner. In her spacious and elegant room, she stood in front of the mirror, surrounded by a pile of carefully selected clothes. Her dark brown eyes reflected a mix of expectation and nervousness. Evelyn was a 28-year-old woman, successful in her career as an architect. Coming from a wealthy family, she always strived to build her own path, never relying on her parents' name or fortune. Her determination and talent had taken her far, earning respect and admiration on her own merits. But that night, all her usual confidence seemed to have evaporated. She was about to meet the parents of Albert, her boyfriend of 2 months. Albert was everything she had ever dreamed of, kind, intelligent, and affectionate. In a short time, he had become an essential part of her life, and Evelyn felt she had finally found her perfect match. "Too formal," she murmured, discarding a black pantsuit. Her fingers slid over the smooth fabric of a red dress, but she shook her head. "Too provocative for a first meeting with the in-laws," she thought. After trying on several options, Evelyn finally decided on an elegant navy blue midi dress. The cut subtly and sophisticatedly accentuated her curves, perfect for the occasion. She completed the look with a pair of pearl earrings, inherited from her grandmother, and nude high heels. Looking at herself in the mirror one last time, Evelyn took a deep breath. "You can do it," she said to herself, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. She knew how important her parents' opinion was to Albert, and she was determined to make a good impression. With a quick glance at the clock, Evelyn realized that she still had time for a quick stop at the supermarket. She didn't want to arrive empty-handed at Albert's parents' house. A good wine and a bouquet of flowers would be perfect, she thought. The supermarket was crowded, typical for a Friday late afternoon. Evelyn sighed, resigned, as she navigated through the packed aisles. Quickly, she picked out an award-winning red wine and headed to the flower section. Focused on choosing the perfect arrangement, Evelyn did not notice the small figure approaching at a run. Suddenly, she felt an impact against her legs. Stunned, she lost her balance, and the bottle of wine slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. The dark liquid spread, staining her leg and the hem of her dress. The initial shock quickly turned into frustration and anger. Evelyn looked down, seeing a little girl about 4 years old staring at her with wide eyes. "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry for my daughter," an anxious voice called out. A young woman, appearing to be around 30 years old, hurriedly approached, pushing a shopping cart. Her brown hair was tied up messily, and her simple attire contrasted with Evelyn's elegant dress. Evelyn's frustration overflowed like a dam about to break. The initial shock gave way to a wave of irritation that took over her face, and her rigid posture betrayed the momentary loss of control. Her furious gaze first landed on the shattered bottle at her feet, then on the dark, sticky stain that was quickly spreading across the hem of her dress, staining the navy blue fabric a deep red. She looked up at the child's mother, who seemed distressed and unable to contain her indignation. She burst out, "If you can't control that child, you shouldn't be out with them." Her voice came out louder and sharper than she intended, attracting glances from other shoppers passing by in the aisle. Evelyn felt the heat rise to her face, but the irritation was greater than any embarrassment. She gestured toward the mess on the floor. "Just look at this mess. My dress is completely ruined, and now I'm going to be late for an important appointment." There was a tone of exasperation in her voice, mixed with the frustration of seeing her meticulous planning fall apart due to a simple mishap. The day, which already carried a dose of anxiety, seemed to have taken an even worse turn. The woman was visibly embarrassed, her cheeks flushing with shame. "I'm really sorry," she murmured, pulling the girl close. "Izzy, apologize to the lady." The girl, with tears in her eyes, whispered an almost inaudible apology. The mother, clearly ashamed, quickly moved away towards the checkouts, leaving Evelyn alone with her frustration as wine dripped down her legs and stained her dress. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, Evelyn went to the wine section to pick up another bottle. While waiting in the checkout line, her anger began to subside. Watching the woman and the child a few lines ahead, Evelyn felt a pang of regret. The woman looked exhausted, trying to keep her daughter quiet while arranging her purchases at the checkout. A sense of empathy began to replace the initial irritation. Evelyn imagined how difficult it must be to shop alone with a small child, especially on a busy day like that. She felt ashamed of her overreaction. Determined to apologize, Evelyn looked around for the woman, but she had already left the supermarket. With a sigh of resignation, Evelyn paid for her purchases and headed home, aware that she was now late. At home, Evelyn took a quick shower and chose a new dress, this time a floral one that highlighted her skin tone. As she got ready, she sent a message to Albert explaining the incident and letting him know she would be a little late. During the entire journey to Albert's parents' house, Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about the scene at the supermarket. How foolish I was, she murmured to herself. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially someone who already seemed to be having a difficult day. Finally, Evelyn arrived at Albert's parents' imposing mansion. The nervousness came back in full force as she rang the doorbell. The door opened, revealing an elegant, middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "You must be Evelyn. Welcome, dear. I'm Eleonora, Albert's mother," said the woman, pulling Evelyn into a surprisingly affectionate hug. "Oh, what a lovely dress. I love floral clothes." Evelyn felt an immediate relief. At least her choice of clothing had been well received. She handed the flower arrangement and the wine to Eleonora, who accepted them enthusiastically. Come meet the rest of the family," said Eleonora, guiding Evelyn inside the house. In the living room, Evelyn was introduced to Albert's father, a tall and cheerful man. Albert was there too, and his eyes lit up when he saw Evelyn. He approached her, giving her a gentle kiss on the cheek. "I am so happy you are here," he whispered. Albert's father served glasses of wine to everyone, and the conversation flowed easily. Evelyn began to feel more relaxed, charmed by the family's hospitality. "Dinner is almost ready," announced Eleonora. "Michaela, the woman who works with us, is finishing the preparations. Her food is simply divine." Hardly had Eleonora finished speaking when a small figure came running into the room. Evelyn froze, immediately recognizing the girl from the supermarket. Her eyes widened as she saw the child's mother entering right behind her. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Eleonora," said the woman, breathless. "Izzy has a lot of energy today." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. The woman she had treated so poorly at the supermarket was Michaela, the staff member of the mansion. "All right, Michaela," replied Eleonora with a gentle smile. "Feel free to let Izzy be comfortable. After all, today was your day off and you were doing us a big favor by coming tonight." Michaela and Evelyn exchanged a quick glance. Recognition flashed in Michaela's eyes, followed by an expression of surprise. Evelyn felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. As soon as Michaela went back to the kitchen, Eleonora commented, "Michaela has been working with us for a few years. She was married to our gardener, but unfortunately, he passed away last year. She's an exemplary woman, and Izzy is a wonderful girl. We adore them both." Evelyn's heart tightened. Not only had she been rude to someone clearly going through a tough time, but this person was dear to the family she was trying to impress. "Excuse me," murmured Evelyn. "May I use the bathroom?" Eleonora pointed the way, but instead of going to the bathroom, Evelyn went straight to the kitchen. She found Michaela stirring a pot on the stove, with Izzy sitting quietly on a nearby stool. "Michaela?" called Evelyn softly. The woman turned, the surprise evident on her face. Evelyn hesitated at the entrance to the kitchen, her sweaty hands clenching together. The comforting aroma of herbs and spices hung in the air, contrasting with the cold feeling in her chest. Izzy swung her feet absent-mindedly while watching her mother cook, unaware of the tension filling the room. With a deep sigh, Evelyn gathered her courage and stepped forward. "Michaela?" she called, her voice low and laden with uncertainty. The woman turned slowly, her gaze meeting Evelyn's with a mix of surprise and caution. The silence between the two stretched for an uncomfortable moment, before Evelyn swallowed hard and continued, her voice trembling slightly. I wanted to apologize, she said, feeling the weight of each word. For what happened at the supermarket, I was rude, impatient, terrible to you and your daughter, and there's no excuse for that. Michaela remained still, her dark brown eyes intently examining Evelyn's face, as if trying to gauge the sincerity behind her words. Time seemed to drag until finally she took a deep breath and nodded slightly. Thank you for your apologies, she replied, her voice calm but without losing firmness. It means a lot to me. Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her throat. Shame burned in her chest like live embers. I was nervous, worried about this dinner, about the impression I would make on Albert's parents, and I ended up taking it all out on you and Izzy. She lowered her gaze, embarrassed. But that doesn't justify what I did. You didn't deserve that. No one does. Michaela remained silent for a moment before letting out a soft sigh. Her features, once tense, softened a bit. A small smile appeared on her lips, not of mockery but of understanding. We all have bad days, she said, her voice laden with fatigue but also empathy. And sometimes we end up reacting poorly without realizing the weight it can have on others. She paused, assessing the woman in front of her. The important thing is not just to make mistakes, but to recognize them and try to fix them. And you are doing that now. Evelyn felt an unexpected relief. Michaela's forgiveness didn't erase what had happened, but it gave her a chance to move forward in a better way. With a shy and sincere smile, she nodded. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Izzy, who had been observing the conversation with the innocence of a child, smiled slightly, as if she understood in her own way that something good had happened between the two. At that moment, Eleonora entered the kitchen, surprising the two women. Is everything okay here? She asked, looking from one to the other. Evelyn took a deep breath and decided that honesty was the best path. It's all good now. Actually, Mrs. Eleonora, Michaela and I met earlier today, she began. And then Evelyn recounted the incident at the supermarket, her overreaction, and her regret. To her surprise, Eleonora did not seem shocked or disappointed. On the contrary, a warm smile lit up her face. Evelyn, dear, said Eleonora, placing a gentle hand on the young woman's shoulder. You didn't have to tell us about what happened at the supermarket. You could have kept it to yourself, let the evening proceed without us ever knowing. But instead you chose to be honest, even at the risk of compromising the impression we were forming about you. That says a lot about your character. Eleonora paused briefly, squeezing Evelyn's shoulder lightly, conveying her approval. We all make mistakes, Evelyn, but few have the courage to acknowledge them so openly, and more than that, to seek to rectify them. Your attitude today shows me that you not only have a good heart but also truly important values. Michaela agreed, adding, It's true. I really appreciate your attitude, Evelyn. The relief Evelyn felt was immense. She looked at Izzy, who was watching the scene with childish curiosity. Izzy, I'm sorry for being upset with you and your mother earlier. It won't happen again. The girl smiled timidly and nodded. The rest of the evening passed surprisingly pleasantly. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally, and Evelyn felt increasingly at ease with Albert's family. She noticed the approving glances exchanged between Eleonora and her husband, and the proud smile on Albert's face. Later, when Evelyn and Albert were saying their goodbyes, Eleonora pulled Evelyn in for a tight hug. You are a remarkable young woman, Evelyn, she said softly. Albert chose well. We hope to see you here more often. On the way back home, Evelyn reflected on the events of the evening. What had started as a potential disaster had turned into an experience of learning and growth. She realized that true strength of character doesn't lie in being perfect at all times, but in having the humility to recognize one's own mistakes and the courage to correct them. Albert held her hand as he drove. "Dinner was amazing, wasn't it?" he said, his tone full of admiration. "My parents loved you." Evelyn smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Yes, it really was," she replied softly. "Your family is wonderful, and I think I learned a valuable lesson today." "What lesson?" Albert asked, curious. "That we all have moments of weakness," Evelyn replied. "What matters is how we choose to deal with them afterward. And sometimes our greatest failures can become opportunities to show who we really are." Albert gently squeezed her hand. "That's why I love you," he said, his words making Evelyn's heart skip a beat. As the car drove through the night, Evelyn felt at peace. The day hadn't been perfect, far from it, but she had learned, grown, and, in the process, strengthened important bonds. And that, she realized, was worth much more than any perfect first impression. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.